Okay, this is the Shuvits Masterclass Part 2. This is a continuation of the first video and begins where the first one left off. So if you haven't seen it, then go check it out first. If you've already seen it, then let's get right into it. So how do we get the board out of the water? What we do is we get the board at an angle and the pressure of the current will force it up and out of the water. Remember folks, this water is moving at 30 miles an hour and has so much power in it that it can knock a fully grown man off his feet and sweep him up over the top. So the energy in the current can easily pop a 5-pound board out of the water. So let me show you something interesting when it comes to the angle of the board as compared to the water current. We're going to use the table here to represent the water in the flats. In the flats, when you throw the shove it, you want to give your board a little bit of an angle. You don't want it to be flat. Usually in the flats, you're going to be riding with the board at a little bit of an angle anyway. Now, this works even better when you put on the brakes because you're pushing the tail down and you're giving the board a little bit extra angle, which makes it even easier to get it out of the water. So here's what it looks like in reality. I'm coming down the wave, I have a normal angle, and I put on the brakes, and you can see how much more of an angle that gives me right there. As I hit that pause point, throw the shove it, the angle gets the board out of the water a few inches, land the shove it, and then head back up the wave. Now, at the upper half of the Flowrider, usually your board is being ridden parallel to the ground or with just a little bit of upward angle. But on the upper half of the wave, the current is moving in an upward direction like this. So your board already has a good angle, and now you can just throw that shove it. You really don't have to give it any extra angle like you do in the flats. It's ready to go. So here's another little nuance that I just wanted to share with you. It's relatively minor, but I just want to throw out everything that I know about Shuvits with that. As you're kicking your board around, it needs to keep that forward edge up a little bit. And what's going to happen is you're almost going to be banking your board a little bit as it goes around. So here's Alex banking a shove it, and you can see how much angle he actually gets on this board here. Usually there's not that much angle. Usually it appears more like this, where it's much flatter. But in any event, you want to keep that forward edge up just a little bit. Now, the other thing that we're doing with our throw is we're giving the board a little bit of push to it, a little nudge, and the nudge is like forward and upward into the current, and that'll give you a little bit more lift. What's going to happen now is as you spin your board, by combining the two of these things, the board's going to wind up at least a few inches above the water in that nice, safe airspace where everything happens slowly and easily and safely. Now let me add this in. I once heard Mike Pappy, who is just a great flow coach, talking about letting the water build up at the bottom of the board, and I never forgot that description. What he says is that as you get to that pause point where you're going to throw the shove it, you'll feel the water start to build up a little bit under your board, then you throw the shove it. The one thing that I'll add into this is that the buildup happens in an instant. It's not some drawn out process. As you pause and start pushing down on the board to get your jump, you'll feel the water build up, and then an instant later, you're going to flick the board. Now, I also want to describe the timing of the flick and the landing a little bit further. As we hit that pause point in the water, our knees are going to be bending some, and we're going to jump our body up into the air. We are essentially doing what I would describe as a little hop. Once you have enough upward momentum, your feet will start to leave the ground. There is a point where your heels will start to come off the board, but your toes are still contacting the board. This is the moment that you want to throw the rotation. Use your back toes and flick the tail around. At the height of our hop, the board will be halfway through the rotation, and our tail foot will wind up to the side. As we start dropping back down, the board will complete the second half of its rotation. What we're concentrating on now is bringing our tail foot back to where it started to meet the nose of the board as it swings around. So here's the rhythm to it. As you start coming up the wave just before you hit the pause point, bend your knees and drop some. Then as you hit the pause point, throw the shove it, land it, and come down the wave. Conversely, as you're coming down the wave and you're about to hit the pause point, start to angle your board a little bit and drop your knees, then throw the shove it at the pause point, land it, and head back up the wave. Nice and easy. Okay, let's do some troubleshooting. These are 6 of the most common screw-ups that we all do when we're first learning Shuvits. By far, the biggest problem that I see is people under-rotating the board. They're only getting the board around about 90 degrees. This is where you have the greatest chance of injury because the edge of the board is going to catch in that current and it's going to come back at you and it's going to smash your feet and shins. Usually the biggest problem here is that your tail kicking foot is not following that true circumference of the circle. People are trying to kick it out 90 degrees to the side, and that's causing the rotation to come up short here. The tail kind of just like stalls out to the side when you do that. It's not that you're kicking without enough force. Usually you have more than enough force, but the direction of the kick is wrong. Everybody is always trying to throw their board around with those big explosive movements. So listen to this, really important. You're not throwing the back end of your board around. What you're doing is you're spinning it, okay? There is a big difference. And you need to focus on keeping the center of the board spinning under you, just behind your front foot. Now you just need to give it enough torque to spin at that full 180 degrees. But it doesn't take much. Once again, it's just a slight movement and then flick of your ankle. That's all you really need. Some of the ways that help me correct this problem are, at first I would try over-rotating the board. So instead of a 180, I would go a little bit past that. And then what happens is I would just back it off and find that kind of sweet spot right in the middle there. Another weird thing that I discovered that really helped me out was when I started learning to do 360 Shuvits. The spin on my 180 Shuvits got drastically better. To spin the board the whole 360 degree rotation requires a really good circular spin, and it'll help get the muscle memory for the curve of the spin. So you may want to try to do some full 360 degree rotations, and even though you know you're not going to make it, it may help your spin. Now, this under-rotation leads to another common problem. People try to compensate by opening up their shoulders and turning their upper body 90 degrees in the opposite direction to meet up with the board as it's coming around. They're almost trying to land sideways, which sometimes you can actually pull it off, but you want to learn it correctly. Keep your shoulders parallel to the current. Don't jump this way and open them up. If you're doing this, then first correct the motion of your kick and then concentrate on keeping your shoulders parallel to the current. On one of Brad Spencer's Ride Like the Pros videos, he addresses people opening up their shoulders by having them keep their arm in this position here. I've used this technique with a few people and it works really well to break that habit. Once they get it, then they can put the arm anywhere they want. The third most common problem that I see is that the board lands out here in front of their toes, and what happens is they keep falling back and butt checking everything. This is usually caused by people kicking with their front foot, so what happens is when they kick, the board gets a little bit of movement out to the side in front of your toes. So once again, your front foot, all it does is it lifts up, it never kicks. If you're doing that, don't do that. That should correct the problem. The fourth problem that I see from time to time is when people throw the shove it and they fall backwards towards the top of the wave and the board shoots out in front of them. If this is happening, then shift more of your weight towards your front foot. Fifth, and this is a big one, landing with your feet too close together. Usually this happens because it feels a lot safer landing with both of your feet together in the middle of the board. No real secret to fixing this, you just have to concentrate on widening your feet. Remember, your front foot never moves, so instead of focusing on spreading both of your feet apart, Focus just on moving your back foot farther and farther away from your front foot. As your spin gets more and more consistent and out of the water, you'll start to feel more confident in landing with a wider stance. Sixth, don't try to bounce your board out of the water. I see people trying to do this all the time, but it doesn't work. Don't do it. Angling the board is what gets it out of the water. Here are 3 other variations of Shuvits, just to give you some other ideas. You could do them landing onto the nozzle, which is a little bit easier because you're landing on solid ground. You could do them as a re-entry after a lip slide, which I first saw Sean Silvera doing. And then you can also do them moving backwards across the wave, which is something I first saw Vanessa Arroyo doing. These are all really nice variations. Also, you can mix up regular Shuvits, front Shuvits, and 360 Shuvits done without any pause in between. These will improve your Shuvits because you have to learn to do the second Shuvits without perfect foot placement. One of the ways to get totally solid with your Shuvits is to do runs that contain nothing but Shuvit variations, because each variation has minor differences in balance and timing, and by learning all of them you'll get better at each individual one. I start off by doing a Shuvit where I land on the nozzle pad, then I go back up and do a Shuvit across the top of the wave. I come back around again and then I go for a lip slide with a Shuvit re-entry. These can get really floaty on the re-entry. Now I set up at the top of the wave to come back down, and then I do a Shuvit in the flats. Then I come back across the top of the wave and I do a backsliding Shuvit, but not much of an actual backslide on this attempt. Back around again and then I'll do a big spin. A big spin is basically a 360 with a Shuvit in the middle of the 360. I combo them by doing a 360 first, and then I do the big spin, which contains the Shuvit. Since I made it through all those variations, I go for the 360 Shuvit, but that didn't work out quite so well. Now, one thing to take note of here is that on one run, I made 7 Shuvit attempts, and when you're learning a trick, it's all about repetition, and 7 reps in one run goes a long way to getting your Shuvits wired. Practice at home on the carpet for muscle memory. Remember to put more weight on the tail to mimic Shuvits in the flats, less weight on the tail to mimic them on the upper half of the wave. You can also practice them on a trampoline. The biggest drawback with these methods is that the board always remains flat, so you don't get that diagonal launching out of the water effect. But the 3 things that you do get with muscle memory is how much kick you need on the board for a 180 rotation, how long you need to have your body in the air to synchronize with the spin of the board, and the curved directional pathway your tail foot spins the board. So that's it for Shuvits. Now you have all those little nuances that you need to pull them off. You will land them way before you get to apply all of the details. So as you get better and better at them, keep applying more and more of those details. So quit sitting around on the couch, get up and try a few of them on your living room carpet, and then get down to your local wave and start practicing these things. Remember, this is a really hard trick, but you will get them. And when you get them, go celebrate, because that's a big deal that you just landed one of these things. Good luck, don't give up on it, and let me know in the comments when you finally get one. All right, I'll see you on the next video.